What if I told you that one sentence, just one sentence, from a BTS interview broke the internet this March? Not because it was shocking, not because it was controversial, but because the moment people heard it, every single person thought of the same name. Suga looked into the camera at GQ and said, calmly, confidently, without a single moment of hesitation, "If we can keep this going, then maybe we can be dancing in our 60s. And the world went silent for a second. Then, everyone said the same name. Jimin. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel is where we go deeper than the headlines. We don't just cover what happened. We talk about what it means. And today, what happened is this. In March 2026, GQ magazine, one of the most prestigious style and culture publications in the world, sat down with BTS for one of the most honest, most raw, most revealing interviews they have ever given. 7 men, 1 table, and questions that actually mattered. They talked about music. They talked about military service. They talked about their new album, Arirang. They talked about what it means to be BTS in 2026. After everything they've been through, after 4 years apart, after solo careers that proved each of them could stand alone, and a reunion that proved they were always stronger together. And in the middle of all of that, Suga said something that nobody expected. Something simple, something quiet, but something that hit harder than any headline could. If we can keep this going, then maybe we can be dancing in our 60s. Let's talk about it. First, you need to understand something about Min Yoongi. Because if you don't know Suga, you might hear that quote and think it's just a fun throwaway line. A lighthearted moment in a long interview. It is not. Suga is not a man who speaks carelessly. He is not the member who fills silence with noise. When Suga talks, there is weight behind every word. He is a producer, a rapper, a songwriter who has spent his entire career choosing words with surgical precision. His lyrics have made people cry in languages they don't even speak. That's not an accident. That's the result of a mind that takes language, every word, every syllable, seriously. So when Suga says something like, "Maybe we can be dancing in our 60s," that is not small talk. That is a belief, a vision, a commitment that he has chosen to speak out loud, in front of the world, on the record at GQ. And the context makes it even more powerful. Suga came back from mandatory military service after a journey that was anything but easy. A shoulder injury, surgery, a long, grueling rehabilitation. There were moments, real moments, where the future was uncertain. Where questions about whether he could fully return to the stage were not just fan anxiety, they were real concerns. And yet here he is, in 2026, sitting in front of GQ's cameras, talking about dancing in his 60s. That is not the statement of a man who is tired. That is not the statement of a man who is going through the motions. That is the statement of someone who looked at everything that tried to stop him and chose to keep going anyway. When Suga says, "If we can keep this going," he means it. Every single word. Now, let's get to the question everyone is actually asking. Why Jimin? Suga didn't say Jimin's name in that quote. He said we. He was talking about all of BTS. 7 members. 1 future. So why, the second that quote started circulating online, did millions of people immediately picture one face? The answer to that question is actually the story of a person's entire life. ParkJimin did not accidentally become a dancer. He chose it. He sacrificed for it. He built his entire identity around it before most people even knew his name. He studied contemporary dance seriously before he ever set foot in big hit entertainment. And when he got there, when he became a trainee, when he debuted, when he stood on stage for the first time as part of BTS in 2013, what he brought with him wasn't just technique. It was something rarer than technique. It was a relationship with movement that most artists spend a lifetime trying to develop and never fully reach. When Jimin dances, something changes. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. It's not just that his lines are clean or his timing is perfect, though they are. It's that when Jimin moves, he communicates. His eyes change. His whole presence shifts. He is not performing choreography. He is saying something. And whatever he is saying, it reaches people, across languages, across cultures, across every possible barrier that should make communication difficult. That is not a skill. That is a gift. And the thing about gifts like that is that time doesn't take them away. age doesn't take them away. Because that kind of connection, the kind that lives in the body and the soul at the same time, doesn't expire. And that is exactly why when Suga said, "Maybe we can be dancing in our 60s," every single person in the ARMY community thought of Jimin first. Because if anyone in that group is going to be on a stage in their 60s, still moving like music is the only language that matters, it's him. Not because the others won't be there, but because for Jimin, the stage is not a job. It's not a career move. It is the place where he is most fully himself. And people can feel that. But here's the part of the story that doesn't get talked about enough. Behind every breathtaking performance, behind every moment where Jimin makes an entire arena go still with nothing but a single movement, there is a person who is harder on himself than anyone watching could ever be. Jimin is a perfectionist in the truest, most unfiltered sense of the word. This is not a character trait that has been softened or managed over the years. It is part of who he is, and he has spoken about it himself. In interviews, in behind-the-scenes content, in quiet moments that got caught on camera when he didn't realize anyone was still watching. There are documented moments of Jimin refusing to stop rehearsing long after everyone else had left the studio, repeating a single section of choreography hundreds of times, not because something was wrong, but because in his mind, it wasn't yet right. There are moments where he cried after performances that, from the outside, looked absolutely flawless because he knew exactly where he felt he had fallen short of his own standard. A standard that, frankly, most performers would never even dream of holding themselves to. This is the part of Jimin that makes people feel two things at the same time: worried and in complete awe. Worried because nobody wants to see someone they care about be that relentlessly demanding of themselves. Because there is a version of perfectionism that is beautiful, and there is a version that is painful. And Jimin has lived in both. And in complete awe, because that level of dedication is only possible when the love is real. You cannot push yourself that hard for something you don't deeply, genuinely, irreversibly love. And every time Jimin has pushed himself to that edge, it has always been because of how much he cares. Not about fame, not about recognition, about the performance itself, about giving the people in that audience something real. That is the Jimin that Suga sees. That is the Jimin that every member of BTS has watched, up close, for over a decade. And that is exactly the Jimin that comes to mind when you hear someone say, "Maybe we could be dancing in our 60s. And here's the thing about perfectionism that people don't often talk about. In the short term, it is exhausting. It is painful. It costs more than it should. But in the long term, over the span of a career, over the span of a life, perfectionism is actually what keeps people going. Because the person who is satisfied too easily is the person who stops growing. The person who always thinks they could have done better is the person who never stops reaching. Jimin has never been satisfied too easily. And that, paradoxically, is exactly why he is built for longevity. Think about the artists who are still performing in their 50s and 60s. The ones who don't just survive but thrive. Who still fill arenas, who still make audiences feel something real. What do they all have in common? It is not just talent. Talent alone fades. What they have is an obsession with the craft itself. A relationship with their art that is deeper than the applause, deeper than the numbers, deeper than any external measure of success. That is Jimin. That has always been Jimin. The applause matters to him, but it is not the reason he keeps going. He keeps going because he has not yet made the performance he truly believes he is capable of making. And maybe he never will. Maybe that is the point. Maybe the pursuit itself is what drives him. And if that is true, if that restless, relentless search for something more is what fuels him, then there is no finish line. There is only the next stage, the next song, the next moment where he steps into the light and tries again. That is the person Suga was describing. Whether he said the name or not, there is something worth paying attention to in the dynamic between Suga and Jimin specifically. And this is not about shipping or fan theories. This is about something that has been visible for years, in the footage, in the interviews, in the way two very different people have consistently brought something out in each other. Suga is reserved, analytical, someone who expresses himself most naturally through music rather than words or physical affection. On camera, he is often the quietest one in the room, the one watching, the one thinking. Jimin is the opposite, warm, expressive, someone whose love for the people around him radiates outward constantly and without apology. He is the one who reaches out, the one who makes sure nobody feels unseen. And what the cameras have caught, over and over again across more than a decade, is these two people, who on paper seem like they come from completely different emotional worlds, make each other softer. Suga smiles differently around Jimin. There is an ease that shows up that isn't always visible elsewhere. And Jimin, for his part, has always spoken about Suga with a kind of quiet reverence, the way you talk about someone whose opinion genuinely matters to you. In the same GQ interview where Suga made his now famous statement about dancing in their 60s, he also said something about Jimin. He spoke about how much love and passion he could feel from Jimin, for the stage, for the music, for the performance. Coming from Suga, that kind of direct, public acknowledgement is not nothing. That is a man saying, out loud, that what he sees in his bandmate is something he genuinely respects, something he genuinely values. That is not a throwaway compliment. That is Suga, in his own careful way, pointing at something he has seen for years, and deciding the world should know about it too. All of this is happening in the context of something enormous. Erarang, the new BTS album. The comeback that ARMY has been waiting for through 4 years of military service, solo projects, uncertainty, and hope. Suga described the album at GQ as something different, more diverse in genre, more mature in emotion. A version of BTS that has been shaped by everything they went through, the global fame, the time apart, the individual growth, and now the reunion. He said it would sound different from the BTS people have known, that fans would see a more mature side of the group this time around. And in that context, the context of BTS returning not as the group they were, but as the group they have become, Jimin's role takes on a new kind of significance. Because Jimin has changed too. His solo work proved that. His voice has grown. His artistry has deepened. He came back to BTS, not as the same person who left, but as a fuller, more complete version of himself. And when that version of Jimin steps back onto the stage with 6 other people who have gone through their own transformations, the result is something that nobody has seen before. That is what Suga is talking about when he says, if we can keep this going. He's not talking about maintaining a status quo. He is talking about a group that keeps evolving, that keeps growing, that keeps finding new reasons to be extraordinary. And he is saying, quietly, carefully, in the way that only Suga can, that he believes this can go on for a very, very long time. Decades even. There is one more thing we need to talk about before we close this out. And it is something that I think gets overlooked in the rush to celebrate BTS as a whole. During the years that BTS was on hiatus, during the years each member served their mandatory military duty and pursued individual projects, the world got to see something it had never quite seen before. It got to see each member stand entirely on their own. No group safety net, no 7-member identity to fall back on. Just one person, one name, one vision. And Jimin, the person who many outside ARMY used to dismiss as just the dancer, walked out onto that solo stage and silenced every single doubt. His music landed differently than people expected. It was not what the critics assumed it would be. It was not the safe, predictable output of someone riding the coattails of a famous group. It was personal. It was raw. It was the work of someone who had spent years watching and learning and absorbing, and who was finally ready to pour all of that into something entirely his own. And the performances that came with it. The way he carried himself on stage without 6 other people beside him. The way he commanded attention not because he was the loudest or the most aggressive, but because there was something in his presence that made it impossible to look away. That is not something you can manufacture. That is not something a team of stylists or choreographers can build for you. That is Jimin. That has always been Jimin. And the solo era just made it undeniable to people who weren't already paying attention. What the solo era also revealed, and this is important, is that Jimin's connection to the stage is not dependent on the setting. It does not require a certain size of production. It does not require specific lighting or backing dancers or elaborate sets. It works in a small room. It works on a massive outdoor stage. It works at 2 in the morning at a half-empty venue just as much as it works in front of a sold-out stadium. Because it comes from inside. It always has. And that is why, when BTS came back together, when the 7 of them walked into the studio and started building Erarang, Jimin brought something back with him that made everything stronger. He came back having proven something to himself that maybe he wasn't entirely sure of before. That he could hold a stage alone, That the fire didn't come from the group, it came from him. And the group just made it burn brighter. So when Suga sits across from GQ and talks about dancing in their 60s, he is not talking about a fantasy. He is talking about men he has watched grow, struggle, disappear for a while, and come back more themselves than ever before. He has watched Jimin go through that entire journey. He has seen what Jimin is made of when there is nobody else on that stage. And he is saying, with complete confidence, that what he sees in that man is not going anywhere. Not in 10 years. Not in 20. Not in 40. That is what those words mean. That is the full weight of them. And that is why, when the quote went around the world, nobody needed to be told who to think of. They already knew. So close your eyes for a second. Just for a second. Imagine a stage. Somewhere in the future. The lights are exactly the same. That warm gold that BTS stages have always had. The crowd is massive. And 7 men walk out. Their hair might be different. The years will have left their marks. But their eyes are exactly the same. And somewhere in that group, one of them steps forward. And he moves. And the crowd goes silent in that specific way. The silence that only happens when something real is happening on a stage. When it's not just performance. When it's truth. That's the image Suga planted with one sentence. That's the future he was describing. And that's why, without any planning, without any coordination, 1 million people all thought of the same face at the same time. Because some things don't need to be explained. Some connections are just that clear. Suga said it, but all eyes went to Jimin. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what Suga intended. If you felt something watching this video, share it with an army who needs to see it today. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? There's a lot more where this came from. I'll see you in the next one.